It's important for me because my goal is isolation. I really don't like people too much. I don't like to be around people, and it's kind of ironic that in this occupation, I'm forced at times to make a fool out of myself in front of up to 10,000 people per night.
Hi everybody, how are you all doing? Welcome back to an extremely spooky episode of the Lines in Wax Discography Retrospective series. I'm recording in a different room to usual and the acoustics are terrible, so I apologise in advance for any noticeable drop in sound quality. Anyway, as it is the season, as they say, the spooky season, where ghosts and ghouls and pumpkins abound, horror movies go on permanent rotation every night at Chair's Lines in Wax, and of course the annual listening ritual of October Rust is undertaken. Yes, today we are going to be talking about the most successful musical outing of the late great Pete Steele, a man of many decent projects of course, but today I am talking about the outstanding, the one and the only Type O Negative. Type O Negative were formed in New York, Brooklyn to be exact, all the way back in 1989, after Peter Steele's band Carnivore broke up. Not to immediately tangent right at the start of the video, but if you've not heard Carnivore, I would heavily recommend checking them out. They're a very fun, thrash metal band with the same dark streak that Type O Negative had, that gallows humour is perfect for the nuclear holocaust themed thrash metal. Both albums are well worth your time and I can't push them onto metalheads enough, to be honest. And even before that, going way back, pre-Carnivore even, Peter Steele played, we're going way off topic here, but we played in a band in 1979, I think they were formed, called Fallout, who to my knowledge released I think only one 7-inch record, which is an absolutely fascinating listen. The two songs on that 7-inch EP, which came out in, I think, 1980 or 1981, are bare bones prototypes for the music that would come in both forms of Carnivore and Type O Negative. So it's well worth hunting this down and taking the trip back in time to see where all the foundations were laid for some of the, what I would consider metal's greatest albums. Just don't expect to get a legit physical copy of this 7-inch without shelling out hundreds of pounds. Anyway, fast forward 8 years to 1989, and Peter Steele, our leading man here, is forming a band called Repulsion with a guitar player called Kenny Hickey. Joining them and rounding out the lineup are Fallout keyboard player Josh Silver and drummer Sal Abruscato.
Don't say nothing, Sal!
It quickly became apparent to the guys that there was already a band called Repulsion. Repulsion are, of course, one of the greatest bands to ever exist, and their only album, Horrified, dominated the tape trading circles years before its official release, laying the groundwork for what would become grindcore. So Pete Steele's Repulsion quickly changed their name to Sub-Zero, until it became quickly apparent to the guys that there was already a band called Sub-Zero. But there was a small problem this time around, at least according to metal legend. The guys in Type O Negative had already gotten their new band logo for Sub-Zero tattooed on them. So, Pete Steele's Sub-Zero, the artists formerly known as Repulsion, now took the name Type O Negative. The internet tells me that the name was taken from a Give Blood ad or something like that, either seen as a flyer or in a phone book, depending on where you get your internet rumours from. The Sub-Zero logo, a circle with a line through it, translated across lovely to the new band name, and as I say, the rest is history. Type O Negative are also really lucky in that Peter Steele was still contractually owed Roadrunner Records a bunch of albums, since Carnivore had broken up way before fulfilling their recording contract with the label. Luckily, execs at Roadrunner enjoyed the early Type O Negative demos, and the Carnival contract was more or less transferred across to Type O, allowing them to really hit the ground running on a fairly sizable record label. And they did just that, dropping the excellently titled Slow, Deep and Hard in 1991. I firmly believe that Type O Negative did something incredibly unique with their music, even if it touched on many of metal's tropes in the process. Steele and the gang clearly didn't take themselves too seriously, but the musical chops are there all the same. This record, Slow, Deep and Hard, is surely timeless now, especially in the annals of doom or gothic rock, even if somewhat falling into the category of parody itself. But what does Slow, Deep and Hard sound like, right? On the surface of it, it's a bizarre mix of hardcore punk, doom metal, gothic keyboards and cheeky humour. The first song, entitled Unsuccessfully Coping with the Natural Beauty of Infidelity, what a song name, is a good cross-section of all of this stuff. Granted, at 2022 standards, it probably won't be lauded for its lyrical content, but stylistically it runs the gauntlet of what Type O Negative brings to the musical table, both with the instrumentation and with Pete Steele's vocal delivery. But yeah, this mammoth opening track is a work of absolute genius, and one of my favourite Type O Negative songs of all time. The rest of the album follows very much in this vein, consisting of enormous songs that are split into suites, or parts, if you will. Just take a look at this original track listing on the screen here. Also, that cover art was ballsy as fuck, pun intended, even though the balls are just out of shot. As you know, it is basically the early 90s equivalent to something like No Love Deep Web by Death Grips. I've played in a few bands in my time, right? I can't imagine trying to convince my bandmates that our record sleeve should be a close-up shot, penetrating. I would love to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation. But yeah, if you thought this record sleeve could be considered a bit tasteless or offensive, well, have I got news for you? 1992's follow-up album, entitled The Origin of The Feces, featured a record sleeve that, well, you've seen the man's shaft on the first album. Now it's time to see the man's, I'm not going to show you the uncensored cover here in case YouTube throws a wobbly and takes down my video, but I think you can guess what the picture is from, from the name of the album alone. Origin of the Feces is probably the silliest album that the band have done. It contains reworkings of the tracks on Slow, Deep and Hard, which are overdubbed with crowd and audience sounds, as well as fake banter in between tracks. Yes, I personally am one of the numpties that thought Origin of the Feces was an actual legit live album for many years, and for that reason I mostly avoided it in favour of the other studio albums. But no, this is an entirely canonical studio album with fake overdubbed audience sounds. The band's sought for more effort here, even though it regurgitates material from the first. It's a bizarre move, truly it is, and one no doubt mostly motivated by the band's own unique, bizarre and self-referential sense of humour. Despite the fact that a lot of the stuff is reimagined from the first album, like I said, we get a cover of Hey Joe reworked as Hey Pete, having shot his woman down. and some of the sounds here hint at the direction the band would go in on future albums, but for the most part, it's still quite raw, like thrash crossed with hardcore punk. And before we move on, I think it would be pretty obvious to point out that after the first pressing of this, Roadrunner used a different cover photo for every version of this release going forward after that. Bloody Kisses in 1993 was the band's third album in the same number of years, and it marked the point where everything changed. Album number 3, slightly different in style from the previous two, was the band's breakthrough album, and the first album to ever go gold for Roadrunner Records. The album eventually would go on to reach platinum status and become one of the most influential goth/metal albums of all time, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The success of Bloody Kisses surprised everybody, I think, from band to label and everyone in between, and the transition from local NYC oddballs to worldwide sensations did not happen without a few road bumps. A few sources of information indicate that Peter Steele was at first reluctant to embrace the band as a full-time entity. He didn't want to quit his day job. I think he worked for the Parks Department for the city of New York or something like that, which apparently inspired a later song by the band called Green Man. Anyway, Pete loved this job, and there were fears that he would instead fold the band rather than commit to a full-time worldwide touring, as it were. But commit to it he did, and the band rose through a period of intense media attention. The music videos for Christian Woman and Black Number 1, two epic songs that were admittedly cut down significantly in their single versions, received a large amount of airplay on the radio and on the television, and the band embarked on massive tours to promote Bloody Kisses. There was another member of the band, though, who was perhaps unhappy with this U-turn in fate and direction. Drummer Sal Abbruscato left the band also at this point, with the band's drum tech, Johnny Kelly, stepping in to fill the slot. It's worth mentioning at this point as well, in a refreshing change of pace compared to some of the other videos that I've been doing here on Lines in Wax, that Sal's departure is the only lineup change in the history of Type O Negative. When Johnny Kelly joined on drums, the four-piece remained solid until the band's untimely demise. But as always, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Sal Abbruscato, after leaving Type O Negative, joined Life of Agony. But anyway, let's hear a little bit more from Bloody Kisses.
And I taste your bloody kiss.
I picked up this album by accident, I think in 2014, when I stumbled upon a free copy of this when I worked clearing out unwanted crap from charity shops. That was a job that I had in my early 20s. And for the next couple of hours in the van, I became baptized in the awesome world of Type O Negative. I felt like I was several decades late to an awesome party full of goth chicks and awesome riffs. Man, why didn't anyone tell me about this shit before? I mean, I'd always liked Black Number 1 and I Don't Want to Be Me as songs, but damn, I fucking snoozed on Type O Negative. Let's just say that. Mixing equal parts doom metal and hardcore punk, as I've said with the previous albums, with extra layers of hammy keyboards, then dress the whole thing up to take the piss out of a subculture that takes itself far too seriously, and bam, you've got the perfect recipe for success. The opening tracks, 20 minutes on their own rather, is Christian Woman and Black Number 1. They're stone cold goth metal classics. Take the piss or not. Pete Steele and Chums churned out more promise and epicness in two fucking songs than half of the goth scene combined in all of history. That's a bit of an overblown statement, but fuck, this shit is good. Kill All the White People, which is an interesting song title, marries hardcore punk with Sabbath worship riffage in a puzzling yet amazing duality. Summer Breeze sounds, as the title promises, a wistful and subtly heavy cover of the 70s classic, and We Hate Everyone pulverizes the listener with more hardcore punk-influenced terror before the sheer epic that is the title track kicks in. Nearly 11 minutes long, the title track is a mammoth-sized, depressing beast. Shit sends fucking shivers up my spine, especially during the piano solo towards the middle. Like, joking or otherwise, apparently the song is about the death of Peter's cat. It is a seriously heavy track and boasts a fucking wicked chorus. Too Late, Frozen is another favourite of mine, starting off fast as fuck and then slowing down to a doomy pace for the remainder. I consider this album to be an absolute staple in my list of legendary metal records. I have only regret for not discovering this total gem of a band any sooner, but from 2014 onwards, I was hooked on these guys, and I can't imagine the impact of this thing back in 1993. It was before my time. I was 4 years old, and it's crazy. But if by some insane chance you're watching this video of mine on YouTube and you have not heard Bloody Kisses by Type O Negative, it is time to crank this up and crack out the black nail polish while you're at it. It is a classic record. Just a quick note on the actual release though, as there are several versions of Bloody Kisses floating around. The original release, which I have, contains 14 songs, I think 10 tracks of actual music. The rest are interludes or weird, jokey instrumental tracks, some of which contribute to the flow of things, others maybe not so much. For multiple of reasons, I think partly judging due to the album's insane success, Roadrunner reissued the album as a digipack, removing all of these interlude tracks, as well as the songs Kill All the White People and We Hate Everyone. There is a bonus track called Suspended in Dusk, which is added to the track list. And for some reason, the track list is all fucked about with and backwards, with the title track, Bloody Kisses, A Death in the Family, being at the front of the album. What? And Black Number 1 being moved to the final song, or just towards the end. It's really strange that they just dicks it all around. To me, this is like the bastardized version of Bloody Kisses, and I really wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Kill All the White People and We Hate Everybody, the songs that were removed, are arguably sore thumbs in regards to the overall vibe and direction of Bloody Kisses. Those two tracks have much more in common with the song content of the band's first two albums, both in musical direction and lyrical content. But damn, just clean, like, fucking accent songs off the record like that is harsh as fuck, in my opinion. Both are great songs, too. Apparently, these choices were made at the behest of Pete Steele, rather than any interfering suits at Roadrunner Records, and we'll touch on this again, on the next record. But finally, there's one more version of Bloody Kisses you can now get. I think this is probably the easiest one to get a hold of these days. It's called the Top Shelf Edition of Bloody Kisses. It's a remaster from 2009, which reinstates the original track listing, including the original running order, the cut songs of Kill All the White People and We Hate Everybody, and the cut interludes. Suspended in Dusk is moved onto the second CD, a bonus disc, which includes a bunch of excellent covers of stuff like Black Sabbath's Paranoid, which was also a bonus track on the not-so-offensive reissues of Origins of the Feces, and there's remixes and single edits of the band's more popular songs. So yeah, that's just a little rundown there of every version of Bloody Kisses that you can get. When Roadrunner and Pete Steele released Bloody Kisses with a more streamlined track list, like in the Digipack version, and with all the hardcore punk-style songs cut out, this is the vision that Peter Steele had in line for his band. The Gothic side of things were clearly working better for Type O Negative than any of the hardcore punk or thrash-style songs that they had. And so therefore, when it came time to make October Rust, a conscious decision was made to soften the sound a little, to pursue this gothic angle more than the harsher forms of metal. To put it simply and truthfully, Peter wanted more women to be fans of the band and to come to the band's shows, and this new direction in sound was a means to an end. It also fed more into the band's commercial success, with songs didn't have to be edited so much to fit into music videos and the like. But what does it sound like? October Rust is quite possibly the perfect album for autumn time. Here, Steele et al. Hone their gothic rock chops and stray away from, for the most part, the doom metal and punk elements that coursed through the first few records. Like I said, Pete Steele wanted more quote-unquote chicks to be fans of the band, and that says it all with this album. Personally, I don't think he had much to worry about when it came to attracting women. His incredible height, his gothic looks and chiseled physique even landed him in an infamous spot posing nude in Playgirl, where everything is laid bare for you to see. But it was said this magazine was read more by gay men than it was by straight women, so whether or not the shoot had its desired effect for Peter, or even reached its target audience, who knows? It's a bizarre moment in metal music history, if nothing else. Anyway, back to October Rust. The production is cold and dense, and the gorgeous keyboard playing leads most, if not all, of these songs. Steele's vocals and bass are heavily prominent, the latter having a washed-out chorus effect over it, which I failed to mention for the previous albums, which is bizarre, but it works with the overall vibe. The whole thing is a magical, spectral listen with a fantastic, haunting quality to it, despite the streak of humour which still is underlying within. Imagine The Cure and the Sisters of Mercy having a fight at a Black Sabbath concert, and you should get a good idea of how this sounds. When the leaves turn gold and fall in their thousands, I honestly cannot think of a better album to spin for the season than October Rust. The title says it all. Despite being their most commercial sounding and easily accessible album, October Rust didn't quite reach the level of sales that Bloody Kisses hit, but it did go gold, which is really, really cool for a band of this nature and style. The early to mid-90s was the band's upward trajectory into superstardom, culminating with October Rust and the punishing tours that no doubt surrounded it. Despite all of this success and momentum, it would be another 3 years with the turn of the millennium dawning before the band would return with another record. So let's look ahead and skip ahead to 1999 for World Coming Down. World Coming Down dropped in 1999 and showcased a much more serious direction for the band. Granted, this is typo negative, so the album still opens with a skit, this time fake sound effects of a CD skipping, making the listener believe that they had purchased a scratched CD. Oh, the mirth, these guys were out of control. World Coming Down deals with far weightier subjects, however, than October Rust, which fell into the lovey-dovey gothic romance category. World Coming Down, she is a depressing one. As I say, dialing back a bit from the slightly more sparkly offering of October Rust, Peter's doomy wrecking crew instead hit us with tales of death, depression and drug abuse. There are a multitude of songs about the deaths of family members, mental health and illness, as well as drug and alcohol addiction. The album's opening song, White Slavery, hits the ground running, dealing with Peter's own cocaine addiction. How cheery, of course. That wicked type O humour is still in there, but as a whole, this is back in the Bloody Kisses realm of misery. The interlude tracks as well are medical and drug-related. The tracks Sinus, Liver and Lung all represent ways to die from the many vices that the band had at the time. It's a dark effort, easily the band's most sinister and genuinely depressing effort, with the stark edge of realism bleeding into the sound in lieu of any gothic or vampiric fantasy. Life Is Killing Me is the final Roadrunner released Typo Negative record, released in 2003, another 4 years after World Coming Down, and brings the band back to focus on their original doomy riffery. Don't get me wrong, World Coming Down was heavy as shit, but things seem a little more focused here. Less focus is given, I suppose, to the more genuinely depressing aspects of the harshness of life and death and addictions. All of that stuff is still here, but with the band's usual gallows humour coming back and taking the centre stage, I think, once again. I'm unsure if I'm remembering things incorrectly, but this release of this album seemed really low-key, and aside from the single I Don't Wanna Be Me, which, reached a fairly wide audience, the record more or less flew under the radar. At least that's how I remember it. I was quite young when this came out, so I could be wrong. Listening now, though, it's nice to see some of the elements of the band's sound come back full circle in the decade or so that they've released records for Roadrunner. My favourite track on this thing also has to be the title track, with its switching of moods, an explosive chorus, and like proper Sabbath worship bit at the end. It's nice to see the band return to their roots with this album, but to utilise those elements in an entirely different manner, to be honest, and to move forward and to make new and exciting music. However, in late 2005, out of nowhere, the Typo Negative website displayed a message of memoriam. Frontman Peter Steele had passed away. This turned out to be complete horseshit and was just the band messing with people once again. Despite having many brushes with death due to his intense lifestyle, drug addiction and so on, Peter Steele was alive and kicking. At least for now. There was another 4-year gap, yet again, between Life Is Killing Me and the band's final album, Dead Again. With Life Is Killing Me, the band's relationship with Roadrunner Records came to an end, allowing the band to strike a deal with SPV Records, who released Dead Again under their Steamhammer imprint. SPV would eventually go bankrupt 2 years after the release of this album, causing Dead Again to go out of print. It wasn't repressed again properly until 2021, when it was picked up by Nuclear Blast. Anyway, back in 2007, Dead Again was quite a big deal. It went over very well with fans and critics alike, and continued much in this vein of the rejuvenated old school sound of Life Is Killing Me, taking that approach and polishing it further. The more eagle-eared audiophile listeners will notice the inclusion of real drumming for the first time on Dead Again since Bloody Kisses. Yes, that's right, even though Johnny Kelly took over from Sal immediately, he never actually appeared on October Rust, World Coming Down, or Life Is Killing Me. Typo Negative's drum sound has always been fairly compressed and heavily isolated, not giving much natural room for the drums to breathe, so it took me a while to notice that it was a drum machine on these albums being used, and not a real drummer. It also speaks, I think, to the level of skill and thought that has gone into the drum programming. It's good when most people don't even notice. People who use drum programming on an album, especially in death metal and grindcore, can get really fucking lazy with just, phoning it in with simple patterns and not making it sound organic. But yeah, that gives Dead Again this the strange honour of being the only album that Johnny Kelly drummed on, despite being a member of the band for like 17 years or something fucking crazy. Dead Again has some fantastic moments, and it's a really good album. It's not a record I see many people talking about when it comes to Typo Negative's legacy. It was also an unintentional swan song, but I don't think that you can argue that the band, I don't think you can say they didn't go out on a high. I mean, look at this thing. It's fucking great. The touring cycle came and went for Dead Again, and the years passed. and the band geared up to record another album. I don't think it was ever decided what label would now work with the band, with SPV going under after Dead Again, but things were gearing up again. The cycle was starting to repeat. Kenny and Kelly had begun rehearsals for the new record, and Peter had been enjoying, for the first time in his life, a period of calm and peace, of actual sobriety. Finally, Peter Steele, our troubled Gothic hero, was clean and sober and was moving to Staten Island to start work on Dead Again's follow-up. However, after spending several days bedridden with flu-like symptoms, on April 14th, 2010, it was announced that Peter Steele had passed away. Given that his faked death was still in recent memory, the headline didn't have the gut punch it usually would have done, at least not for me. But no, reading the news articles at the time, it quickly dawned on me, and I suppose everybody, that this time it wasn't a joke. Pete Steele was gone. Initial reports indicated that he had died of heart failure, perhaps as a result of his tumultuous years with a heavy addiction to cocaine, amongst other things. However, it is a sad irony that Peter actually passed away in a period of his life which saw him clean, sober, and seemingly in good health for the first time in decades. Eventually, the cause of death was announced as sepsis as a result of diverticulitis, which sounds like a made-up Rick and Morty style disease, but it's legit.
It's too bad they don't have a telethon for fuckface-itis, huh? They found a cure yet?
But yeah, Google it. It sounds pretty horrible. Just like that, the legend that was Peter Steele was no longer with us, and the rest of the guys confirmed later in that year, 2010, that Typo Negative would not continue without him, the band essentially dying along with its frontman. It was an abrupt end, and one that's very tragic. Peter was 48 years old, and I'm sure they had plenty of more albums and creative juices in them. Steele and co are extremely talented songwriters, taking Gothic rock to new heights with their unique blend of songwriting styles. I feel there will never be a band that can fill the void left by Pete and Typo Negative, nor really do I actually want a band to fill that void. Listening to some of the guys from Typo's newer projects is cool, but it doesn't really fill that gap for me. There really is nothing else like Typo Negative, and I miss them dearly, even though my fandom didn't really take off until the man himself was already gone. And that's it, folks. It's not a super long video for us today. Thank you for watching. Just wanted to get the Typo one out in time for Halloween. If anything, Typo Negative and our man Pete Steele have shown us the absurdity of life through their twisted, wicked humour and powerful, gorgeous songwriting and fantastic music. For a band that confronted death many times through their music, the spectre of actual death was always sweeping far too close in reality too, and it eventually caught up with Mr. Steele. Life is crazy, terrifying and fragile all at once. It can end at any point for any reason with seemingly no what